Hey guys, tonight we begin far above the Earth, watching through the eyes of a silent satellite. If you're like me, you carry questions that sleep can't quite silence. Not the loud ones, the gentle ones, the kind that don't demand an answer, just a little space. Why do some stories never resolve? What makes an event vanish, leaving only paper trails, fading radio signals, and lingering doubt? This isn't about fear, not tonight. This is about wonder, about drifting slowly into the places where explanation gives way to mystery, where the facts are real, but meaning hovers just out of reach. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what was the last thing you remember before sleep pulled you under. Now dim the lights and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The night settles around you like a breath. The world below hushes into darkness. And somewhere high above the Indian Ocean, a silent sentinel floats in orbit. It was called Vela, one of a fleet of satellites launched by the United States to maintain the fragile peace of the Cold War era. Its job? To detect nuclear detonations in the atmosphere. Essentially, a guardian in the sky. On a cool September evening, that sentinel recorded something unexpected. Soon after 12:53 a.m. Coordinated Universal Time, its optical sensors registered a mysterious event. One flash, bright and instantaneous. Another flash, slower, lingering softly. Together they formed a telltale pattern known as a double flash. This pattern had only been seen before in atmospheric nuclear tests. The scientists who reviewed the data at Patrick Air Force Base recognized it instantly. But there was a problem. No nation came forward to claim responsibility. No alarms sounded. Only the quiet after the flash remained. In the days that followed, a flurry of secret communications spread through governmental channels. At the Central Intelligence Agency in Langley, Virginia, analysts assessed the satellite data. In classified reports, they wrote that the most probable explanation was a covert nuclear test, possibly conducted over the ocean by a country or coalition that wished to remain anonymous. Meanwhile, at the White House, President Jimmy Carter's scientific team, including Professor Jack Ruina from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, examined the data independently. In a public report in November 1979, they proposed that the flash could have been caused by natural phenomena, lightning, meteors, or an atmospheric reflection, nicknamed a zoo event. Yet in private, the division of opinions grew. Some scientists at MIT questioned whether the light pattern was close enough to pass nuclear tests to justify that explanation. One advisor emailed notes that evening cautioning, "We have a situation that looks nuclear, but doesn't behave like any test we've cataloged." Other puzzling clues surfaced. Undersea microphones, hydrophones, registered faint noises around the same time, with acoustic signatures similar to underwater blasts. In Puerto Rico, scientists at Arecibo Observatory documented ripples in the ionosphere, faint anomalies that sometimes follow aerial explosions. Around that time, agricultural researchers in southeastern Australia found traces of iodine-131 in sheep thyroids, a known byproduct of nuclear fallout. Though levels were low and not sufficient for alarm, the findings raised eyebrows. By early 1980, Sensitive diplomatic channels started buzzing. Declassified cables later revealed that some State Department officials believed South Africa, then under apartheid, and possibly Israel, might have collaborated in a secret underwater or atmospheric test. Others cautioned that openly naming either could lead to international unrest, or worse, regional conflict in southern Africa. In one private memo, Carter referred to the incident as unfortunate yet puzzling, possibly a dangerous signal that carries no admission, no accountability. As the 1980s progressed, the issue faded in public discourse. But archival work revealed secret congressional inquiries, letters to the White House, and internal debates. A senator reportedly asked whether the U.S. itself had triggered the flash, and was informally assured that no domestic program could replicate this signature with external optics. In the mid-2010s, historians and nuclear scholars revisited the incident. A 2017 paper published by the Natural Resources Defense Council re-examined hydroacoustic data, fallout report summaries, and meteorological records. Their conclusion: a small atmospheric or underwater detonation remained a plausible explanation. In the same period, amateurs and historians started gathering online to explore the event in more detail. In Reddit forums dedicated to Cold War mysteries and unexplained phenomena, users shared satellite flight paths, wind current models, archived cables, and FOIA, Freedom of Information Act documents. Some researchers suggested a meteor could have caused the flash, with reflections off upper clouds. Others pointed out that even if a test occurred, its anonymity would have shielded it from almost any fallout-based discovery. One user posted thoughtfully, "If this had been near land, we'd have found a crater or heard explosions or seen fallout. But the open ocean keeps its secrets well. Through all of it, the Vela incident remains unresolved. It rests at the convergence of satellite science, Cold War intelligence, declassified memos, regional fallout traces, whistleblower speculation, and collaborative citizen research. No conclusive proof, no confession, only questions left floating in the electromagnetic silence." The ocean carries its own kind of silence, quiet, deep, and unyielding. Tonight, let that silence settle like a soft blanket as we listen to a story that vanished into the night air, leaving only questions behind. Imagine a warm October evening in 1948, the kind of Caribbean night that holds its breath. On October 28th, a Douglas DC-3 airliner prepared to take flight from San Juan, Puerto Rico, bound for Miami, Florida. Its departure was smooth, routine. The engines hummed steadily, cabin lights glowed softly, and the crew spoke quietly into microphones that linked them across the Atlantic. About 15 passengers settled into their seats, unaware of the night ahead. At 11:32 p.m. local time, the captain made his first routine transmission to Miami's control tower. "Good evening. We're climbing through 2,000 feet, heading out. Good night." His voice was calm, professional, nothing to suggest alarm. For the next hour, the voice from the DC-3's cockpit guided listeners like a friendly intrusion. Flight level 90, smooth air, slightly turbulent patch near the Windward Islands. A distant mumble between control tower and pilot. And then, nothing. Silence swallowed the signal. Radios fell quiet. Radar screens showed a single blip fading into the dark expanse over the water. No distress call, no alarm, just a normal flight and then gone. By dawn, search teams surged into activity. Ships steered into the hazy horizon. Planes sliced through soft morning light. But the sea offered no reply. No wreckage bobbed on the surface. No life jackets waved in the waves. No signs that a plane had ever been there. The ocean remained smooth, dark, and mute. As days stretched into weeks, fragments began to appear. A lone seat cushion. A broken piece of cabin panel drifted ashore near the Dominican Republic. A shredded logbook page, stained with salt water and stamped faintly with the DC-3's serial number. These crumbs hinted at a mystery but offered no clarity. Search logs mentioned sonar sweeps, currents tracked, drift patterns plotted. Mariners reviewed wind charts. Historians pored over pilot schedules. But nothing resolved into certainty. And gradually, time covered the open questions in quiet complacency. Yet the disappearance persisted in aviation circles. Reports were archived. Experts discussed invisible variables, magnetic anomalies between San Juan and Miami that night. Sudden storm cells that may have interrupted instrument signals. A phenomenon known as electrical static discharge that occasionally interfered with early radios, scrambling communications mid-flight. One retired flight engineer recalled years later, "Flying east from San Juan used to be strange. At night the sea becomes like black glass. Your instruments hum, your lights glow, but there's no horizon. You rely on needles and pilot instinct. In that dark, one misinterpretation, an altimeter off by a few hundred feet, could lead the plane away from its safe corridor without the crew even realizing." Within families, the disappearance became a quiet ache. Letters from concerned relatives circulated among airline staff. Some asked whether the aircraft might have been hijacked, whether it could have been intercepted by tramp steamers or hidden away. Others questioned mechanical fault, electrical fire, turbulence, engine failure. But without wreckage or radio transmission, the theories remained silent. In a 1950 aviation periodical, a writer noted, "If the plane crashed directly into the sea in calm weather, minimal debris would float. The Gulf Stream could sweep whatever rose quickly beyond reach. Nothing seen does not mean nothing happened." In private, pilots shared stories of phantom lights over the horizon, ship beacons or cloud reflections mistaken for aircraft. Could the DC-3 have veered towards such lights, the crew distracted, instruments misreading their orientation? It's an unsettling thought, a familiar voice drifting off course into the unknown. Decades later, aviation researchers reconstructed what little was known. Flight paths overlaid on oceanic current models, drift currents measured, simulations created. Some analysts suggested that if the DC-3 descended unexpectedly in darkness, it might have disrupted radar return with Pacific sponge-like seabed reflections. Yet nothing matched. Then came occasional memory, elderly air traffic controllers recalling the eerie clarity of that night. No storm, no chatter, just the voice of an aircraft that spoke, then vanished. A single conversation that ended mid-flight and stayed that way. Some mysteries arrive not with light or sound, but with a hum. A low-frequency vibration, heard by some, ignored by most, and explained by none. This is the story of the Taos hum, a steady vibration reported by residents of a small town in northern New Mexico. In the early 1990s, residents of Taos, New Mexico, began hearing something strange: a steady, low-frequency droning, like a distant diesel engine idling somewhere beneath the earth. Not everyone could hear it, but for those who did, it was impossible to ignore. At first, people doubted themselves. Was it tinnitus, traffic on a distant highway? But the hum persisted, night after night, day after day. It seemed to come from nowhere, and it lingered everywhere. Researchers arrived to investigate. University teams with audio recorders and frequency analyzers set up in homes, schools, and open fields. They logged reports. It ticks inside my head. I wake up at 3 in the morning because of it. The hum sleeps with me, then fades when I go outside. They measured sound levels below 30 hertz. Imperceptible to most ears, but rattling to sensitive souls. Some recorded subtle vibrations in windows, furniture, even jewelry. In 1994, New Mexico Tech conducted interviews with callers. Of more than 400 respondents, about 8% said they heard the hum consistently. The researchers published findings describing a real auditory experience, at least for some people. But what could cause such a sound? Some proposed mechanical sources, equipment in water, treatment plants, ventilation systems, or distant traffic infrastructure. Others suggested electromagnetic interference affecting inner ear signals. One geophysicist speculated that minor geological movement, local tremors, or subsurface water flow could create infrasonic waves below normal hearing thresholds. Local utility companies checked their lines. They shut down compressors, replaced transformers, ran tests for magnetic flux. All systems reported normal. No anomalies. The hum remained. Meanwhile, online communities caught wind of the story. In forums dedicated to unexplained phenomena, people from other towns, Windsor, Ontario, Bristol, England, Auckland, New Zealand, shared eerily similar reports. They called it the Windsor hum, the Bristol buzz, the Auckland thrumming. Fields of possibility expanded. Maybe hum phenomena were psychological, maybe environmental, maybe something deeper, global. One user wrote, "The hum started for me when I moved to town. Couldn't sleep. It's like the earth is speaking, but whispering notes you can't always catch." Medical professionals became involved. Ear, nose, and throat specialists tested hearing, brain scans, tympanometry. Vibration-sensitive listeners had normal hearing profiles, but stress and sleep deprivation accompanied their experience. Psychologists examined psychogenic causes, heightened awareness, anxiety, confirmation bias. Yet many patients described the hum as a visceral reality, not imagined, but physically felt. Engineers pulled power grid maps, seeking correlation with electrical substations or long-distance pipelines. Environmental scientists measured infrasonic levels near dams, wind turbines, and industrial sites. But none correlated cleanly with Taos residents' hotspots. Occasionally, a visitor would remark that the hum disappeared for them. Sometimes just turning off a ceiling fan mitigated it. Sometimes wearing earplugs helped. But for others it remained, insistent, low, unrelenting. Community meetings formed. Residents traded notes. Some developed attachment, describing the hum as companionable, a gentle background drone. Others hated it, marking it as intrusive, intolerable. It became a test of tolerance as much as perception. Local musician reported hearing harmonics in the hum, like faint musical overtones. In one experiment, sound engineers played a recording of the hum, looped and slowed in a quiet studio, asking listeners to describe what they heard. Some heard a tone, some heard a beat, many heard nothing. Nobody reached resolution. For others beyond Taos, the compatibility of experiences pointed to something else. A global mystery, not in oceans or skies, but deep in vibration, low in resonance, just beneath hearing. In 2013, BBC documentary revisited the phenomenon, interviewing Taos residents and hum witnesses around the world. Engineers considered infrasonic infrasound from jet engines or industrial machines. Geologists revisited underground water flow and resonant frequency of subterranean passages. One geophysicist offered a closing reflection. The earth is full of imperceptible music, faults grinding, water draining, and sometimes we stumble across it. Let the hum echo in your imagination now, a vibration you cannot hear but can feel, a whisper behind your mind, a mystery quietly humming through the world. And from that invisible resonance, we sink into another kind of quiet, the still, blue silence beneath the ocean's surface. Here lies the mystery of the Yonaguni underwater terraces, monumental stone formations off the coast of Japan, where nature's hand and the faint memory of human architecture seem to converge. In April 1987, a scuba instructor named Kihachiro Aratake led a small group of divers off the coast of Yonaguni Island, a remote slice of land south of Okinawa. Their aim was simple: explore reefs, observe marine life, take underwater photographs. But as Aratake guided his group through the crystalline Pacific waters, he discovered something extraordinary. Large, flat stone ledges carved at precise angles, forming terraces, geometric planes, steps, rising silently from the seabed. The formations lay about 5 to 40 meters beneath the surface. They stretched hundreds of meters. Each stone platform looked as though it had been hewn by ancient hands. Right angles, flat planes, corners sharp enough to cast straight lines even underwater. The structures seemed more monumental than reef structures. Some formations resembled staircases or what might have been roads, walls, even plazas. Morphological details hinted at purpose. Ridges aligned with cardinal directions, angles frequently set at 90 degrees, terraces forming parallel lines separated by consistent depths. To the divers, it felt uncanny, as though they'd found a submerged ancient city. Word spread quietly. Marine geologists, archaeologists, architects, and curious explorers gathered interest. In 1988, geologist Masaaki Kimura of the University of the Ryukyus began diving these terraces regularly. He published observations and photographs, rebuilding 3D reconstructions and hypothesizing that they might be remains of a prehistoric city, possibly dating back 10,000 years before the last ice age, when sea levels were far lower. Kimura pointed to what looked like stone pillars, monolithic walls, even terrace steps that back then could have been part of a coastal settlement. He referenced similar stonework found on land. Kimura's interpretation suggested that as sea levels rose, what was once a coastal structure was gradually submerged and preserved underwater. Others looked more skeptically. Marine geologists suggested these formations could be natural, shaped by Y-shaped joints, tectonic pressures, fracturing the bedrock into clean shapes. Tsunamis, currents, wave erosion along fault lines might have accentuated straight lines. The island lies near a major tectonic interface. The Huga Trough and seismic activity might have broken limestone into block-like geometries. Still, others wondered if flowing sand, sediments brushing across the rock surface over centuries, might have polished the formations, exaggerating their step-like appearance. Some correlating bathymetric studies show similar angular structures in areas with comparable geology. Arguments grow richer as the formations are mapped and measured more precisely. Topographic scans revealed a triangular formation known as the Triangle Mound. 3 pillars that evoke architectural purpose in their precision and uniform spacing. One platform, called Monument, spans nearly 90 meters. There's a long underwater ridge some call Waterworks, a linear trench with grooves resembling water channels or drainage. Each name evokes presence, structure more than stone. Diver testimonials add texture to the wonder. One marine archaeologist described standing on a platform that soared beneath turquoise light, turning slowly to observe the geometry. I felt as though I'd stumbled into ruins of a kingdom washed away by time. Another diver remarked on the stillness. No schools of fish darting through these flat surfaces, only currents drifting over polished limestone. Cameras captured hand-sized pebbles at unusual angles, small stone counters, discarded by time. Traditional Okinawan folklore speaks of an ancient civilization, lost beneath the waves, whispered in village stories of drowned lands. Some locals say their ancestors spoke of structures where humans once walked. But without written records older than 500 years, these remain oral echoes brushed faint against seafoam. Modern technologies, photogrammetry, and 3D sonar mapping grasp at data. Researchers analyze fracture patterns. Fracture systems in the natural rock show joints parallel and perpendicular, common in sedimentary rock. Angular block shapes are not unheard of. Yet the consistency across wide area is unusual. There's also evidence of possible terracing human hands could create. Cut surfaces polished at levels that align with multiple platforms. Stone samples reveal tool-like marks, linear abrasions not typically formed by natural erosion. But those linear marks are disputed. A handful of researchers credit them to scuba equipment rubbing or inadvertent brush marks. As theories remain open, the formations remain unchanged. They sit quietly, kilometers deep, waiting for renewed exploration. In some places, corals cling to cracks. In others, sand fills the shelves, eels vanish into crevices. Light ripples across terraces, casting spectral shadows. Imagine an aquatic cityscape drifting in the currents of time. Archaeologists remain longing for excavation rights, permits, and funding. Sediment cores offshore could test whether human activity once existed. Carbon dating organic remains, if any, might anchor human presence. Meanwhile, enthusiasts respond online in gentle wonder. Messages feed through marine mystery forums. One user posted, "Does human civilization vanish, leaving no trace but terraces as props for fish drama? Or does nature mimic what we expect structures to look like?" Another commented, "Yonaguni's terraces remind us of permanency lost to deep time. Shapes endure beyond memory. It remains unsolved." a realm where geology meets folklore, where precision meets entropy, a place that invites you to imagine, not sensationally, but thoughtfully. Tonight, as you drift further into calm, picture the water above becoming clearer and darker with depth. Imagine descending slowly into blue, staircases not built for climbing, walls not engineered for defense, but hints of what might have been. Shadows play across angles. Sandstone light dances across surfaces carved and smoothed by centuries. Whether made by hands or roped into shape by nature, the underwater terraces of Yonaguni are a whisper in stone, a suggestion of stories beneath waves, stories not lost but submerged, waiting for ears tuned gently to listen. Let that image settle. The sea has always been a better keeper of memory than any voice could ever be. And from one sunken mystery, we drift to another, one not proven by stone, but carried in story for more than 2,000 years. This is the tale of the lost city of Atlantis, first told in the words of Plato, yet echoed in cultures across centuries, calling with the same rhythm as waves against the shore. Plato, the Athenian philosopher, wrote about Atlantis in two of his works, Timaeus and Critias, around 360 years before the Common Era. He described an island empire beyond the Pillars of Hercules, known to us now as the Strait of Gibraltar. According to his telling, Atlantis was powerful and wealthy, ruled by kings descended from the sea god Poseidon. Temples gleamed, harbors bustled, and marble pillars rose in concentric circles, protected by rings of alternating land and water. But then came the fall. Suddenly, catastrophically, in a single day and night of misfortunes, Atlantis vanished beneath the sea. The city sank, swallowed whole, its memory preserved only in stories and in the dialogues of a solitary philosopher. For centuries, Atlantis lingered in imagination. Medieval writers barely mentioned it. But during the Renaissance, Atlantis resurfaced. Maps sketched phantom isles in the Atlantic. Scholars debated whether Plato spoke literally or allegorically, warning Athens of hubris and collapse. In the 19th century, explorers scoured the ocean for real topography matching Atlantis. Maurice de Guérin in 1856, Ignatius Donnelly in 1882, whose book Atlantis. The antediluvian world fused Plato's account with geological theories, proposing Atlantis lay beneath the Atlantic or the Caribbean. By the 20th century, oceanic science advanced. Geologists charted mid-Atlantic ridges. Sonar scanners traced underwater mountains. Some conjectured Atlantis' ring-shaped city might align with submerged features in the Azores. Others argued for locations as divergent as the Bahamas Bimini Road, off Spain's Doñana coast, or the continental shelf near Antarctica. O'Brien's hypothesis floated quietly among researchers. Archaeologist Charles Berlitz suggested a link between Atlantis and the explosion of the volcanic island Thera, which is now Santorini, around 1600 years before the Common Era. A towering eruption that reshaped the eastern Mediterranean. But Santorini's Minoan civilization was real, whereas Atlantis remained elusive. Scientific investigations deepened. Core samples from ocean floors measured sediment layers, volcanic ash deposits, and tectonic disruptions. Nothing matched Plato's description exactly, but researchers noted how memory might merge truth and allegory. Geological events, earthquakes, tsunamis, shape myths too deeply into collective memory. In 2004, a seismic event off the Azores revealed a sunken structure at about 1,000 meters depth. Sonar images reproduced circular outlines. A few enthusiasts whispered that Atlantis lay there, rings of rock faint in shadow. Geologists, more cautious, said it was likely a natural volcanic caldera shaped by cooling lava fractures. Folklore shapes our hunger for the lost. Tales on the island of Santorini still speak of a fire mountain erupting, submerging villages, whispering that gods flooded a land once radiant. In the Canary Islands and Madeira, local legends recall lost cities in the sea, reaching into coastal rock art and petroglyphs carved long ago. Modern Atlantis researchers, academics, pseudoscientists, enthusiasts gather data once more. They compile bathymetric maps, satellite surveys, cut cores, analyze limestone composition, and revisit Plato's text line by line, reconstructing timelines, sea levels, societal structure. Philosophical scholars hold another belief. Atlantis was never meant to exist, but to teach. A golden city, advanced and beautiful, yet doomed by arrogance. A parable about power, morality, and hubris. A story designed to reflect Greek ideals and the consequences of empire. Yet at the same time, casual readers, dreamers, and conspiracy buffs share something else: the longing. Atlantis lives in popular culture, in novels, films, video games, even theme park attractions. It's a symbol of lost potential, of mystery, of the unknown. Some scientists caution against chasing myth. But many admit myths evolve. Occasionally they resonate with buried truths. Plato's story may veil real devastation. A tsunami or collapse of ancient coastal civilization framed poetically to teach generations later. If fictional, Atlantis taught. If historical, it was destroyed. Either way, the myth remains alive. Tonight, let the idea drift quietly through your thoughts, not as an omen, but as an invitation. Imagine walking along a marble column on sunken streets, the water caressing stones smoothed by time. A city where harbors once pulsed with boats, now silent. A memory that lingers beneath the waves and beneath our curiosity. Atlantis waits not for locating, but for pondering, for feeling. Let it drift softly as the sea holds its breath. And from those imagined streets beneath the sea, we rise to the surface, to another mystery carried by water. A ship found adrift, her cabin still, and her tables set, yet her crew gone without a trace. This is the story of the Mary Celeste, the vessel that woke in the middle of the ocean with no one left aboard. It was November 7th, 1872, when the Mary Celeste left New York Harbor, heading for Genoa, Italy. Her wooden hull sliced through the cold Atlantic, steady and sound, carrying 10 souls. Captain Benjamin Briggs, his wife Sarah, their 2-year-old daughter Sophia, and 7 carefully selected crewmen. They were all experienced, all trusted. Captain Briggs himself was known for his deep sense of responsibility, methodical, religious, and deeply respected. The kind of man who did not take chances lightly. The ship's cargo included over 1,700 barrels of industrial alcohol, sealed and stowed below. It was a flammable cargo, but a legal one, and not considered especially dangerous. For nearly 3 weeks, The Mary Celeste sailed smoothly. The logbook recorded daily progress. The weather held steady. There was no distress, no threats, and then nothing. On December 5th, the British ship Dei Gratia spotted the Mary Celeste drifting aimlessly, about 400 miles east of the Azores. Her sails were tattered, but she was still afloat. No distress signals, no crew on deck, no signs of violence or looting. She was simply alone. When sailors from the Dei Gratia boarded her, what they found felt more like a stage than a ship. The galley was stocked. Meals had been prepared, but not eaten. The captain's log ended abruptly 10 days prior. The navigation instruments were still present, maps unrolled, and the ship's only lifeboat, a single 20-foot yawl, was missing. It was a scene frozen in time, not of chaos or panic, but of sudden and complete absence. 10 people had vanished. No bodies, no blood, no clear cause. At first glance, theories ranged from pirates to mutiny to supernatural curses. But nothing had been stolen. Not the cargo, not even the valuables in the crew's quarters. There were no signs of struggle, no broken wood, no hastily gathered bags. Everything was in its place. And so, more grounded theories began to take shape. One possibility that rose above the others was surprisingly quiet. An accident not of catastrophe, but of judgment. It's believed that some of the alcohol barrels had leaked. Indeed, when the ship was eventually inspected, 9 barrels were found empty. The fumes from those barrels, heavy, invisible, and potentially flammable, might have filled the hold. There was no explosion, no fire, but Briggs may have feared there could be. He may have believed that the ship was moments away from igniting. And there was another detail. The main pump was dismantled, possibly for maintenance. Without it, he may have been unable to accurately measure how much water was gathering in the hold. A misjudgment of flooding, combined with the fear of an alcohol explosion, might have pushed Briggs to make a drastic choice. He may have ordered the entire crew, including his wife and daughter, into the lifeboat, perhaps with the intention to wait at a safe distance until the fumes cleared or the danger passed. After all, the lifeboat was just large enough for all 10. It would have been crowded, but manageable. But this leads to the true tragedy. If the line tethering the lifeboat to the ship broke, or was never secured properly, the small craft could have drifted into the Atlantic swells. Once separated from the Mary Celeste, returning would have been nearly impossible. A single yawl adrift in open sea, even with calm skies, is a fragile thing. And that brings us to what might be considered Captain Briggs' greatest mistake. Not malice, not recklessness, but a miscalculation. First, trusting a faulty pump may have misled him into believing the ship was sinking. Then, fearing the invisible danger of alcohol fumes, he evacuated not just the crew, but his family. Finally, if he failed to secure the lifeboat properly, if there was no safety line or it was too weak, he may have sealed their fate the moment the boat touched water. There was no radio, no emergency beacon. Once gone, they were gone. And there's one more point that haunts historians. Briggs left no note, no final entry, no written explanation. The logbook's last lines were days before the abandonment. Whatever decision he made, it was undocumented, a silence that became part of the legend. This wasn't a ship swallowed by violence, nor one pulled under by storm. The Mary Celeste floated for days, perfectly capable, waiting. She was found with her sails up, her cargo nearly intact, her course still steady. It's almost as if she expected her crew to return at any moment. But they never did. In the years that followed, the ship was salvaged and returned to service, though her reputation remained cursed. Sailors believed she carried bad luck. She changed owners several times, and in 1885, just over a decade after she was found, she was deliberately run aground off the coast of Haiti in an insurance scam. It was a dishonorable end for a vessel once known for her strength. Today, the story of the Mary Celeste persists not because of what is known, but because of what remains unanswered. No definitive theory has ever been proven. Every explanation leaves just enough space for doubt. She has become the sea's quiet riddle. A ship not wrecked, not sunk, not stolen, just emptied. The Mary Celeste reminds us that even on a calm sea, with a competent captain and no clear danger, a series of small misjudgments can echo louder than any storm. Her story lingers, not with horror, but with a sort of quiet ache, an unresolved moment that drifts just beyond reach. And so she sails on in thought, in whisper, in unanswered questions. From the open sea, we turn to snowbound heights. The frozen silence of the Ural Mountains in the winter of 1959. Here, 9 experienced hikers, young, strong, confident, would step into a fate that no investigation has ever fully untangled. This is the story of the Dyatlov Pass incident. It began in late January, when a group of students and recent graduates from the Ural Polytechnic Institute in Sverdlovsk set out for an ambitious ski trek to Mount Oterten. Their leader, Igor Dyatlov, was meticulous, a man who documented everything, tested equipment thoroughly, and inspired trust. There were 10 hikers at first. One, Yuri Yudin, would turn back early due to illness, a decision that would save his life. The remaining 9 carried on, their route mapped in careful detail. As they moved deeper into the Ural range, winter tightened around them. Temperatures plunged to minus 25 degrees Celsius or minus 13 degrees Fahrenheit, and winds whipped across the slopes. On February 1st, they reached the eastern flank of a peak the local Mansi people called Holat Siachel, Dead Mountain. They were behind schedule. Dyatlov decided to camp right there on the slope instead of descending into the more sheltered forest below. Why? Some believe it was to practice camping in harsh, exposed conditions. Others think they lost daylight and had little choice. The tent was pitched, skis laid underneath for insulation, the canvas anchored against the snow. Inside, they prepared a simple meal. The last photographs from recovered cameras show them smiling, working together, unaware they were capturing their final hours. At some point in the night, something went terribly wrong. Rescuers, sent out weeks later when the hikers failed to return, would find the tent still standing but slashed open from the inside. Their belongings, boots, jackets, food, remained. Whatever happened had driven them into the freezing dark in little more than socks and underclothes. Footprints led down slope toward the tree line. Some prints showed bare feet. Others had only socks or one shoe. No sign of a chase, no signs of struggle. The steps were deliberate, not chaotic. At the edge of the forest, 2 bodies were found beneath a cedar tree. A small fire had been made there, and branches were broken several meters high. Perhaps they had climbed for a better view or to break wood. 3 more bodies, including Dyatlov himself, were found scattered between the tree and the tent, as if they had been trying to return. The final 4 were discovered months later in a ravine under deep snow. These had the worst injuries: massive chest fractures, skull damage, internal bleeding. And yet, their skin was mostly intact, no external wounds large enough to match the internal damage. One woman was missing her tongue and eyes. The autopsies deepened the mystery. 6 deaths were attributed to hypothermia. 3 had fatal injuries, usually seen in car crashes. Radiation traces were found on some clothing, low levels, but unusual. The official investigation concluded that the hikers died due to a compelling natural force. That was the phrase, vague, almost poetic, and wholly unsatisfying. Over the decades, theories have multiplied. Avalanche theory. This is the explanation now favored by many scientists. In 2020, researchers Johann Gaum and Alexander Puzrin used modern avalanche modeling, aided by data from Disney's Frozen animation snow simulations, to show how a small delayed slab avalanche could occur on that slope. Snow displaced earlier in the evening might have settled and then shifted hours later, pushing into the tent with sudden force, injuring some, and sending all 9 fleeing to safety they never reached. Skeptics argue that the slope's angle was too shallow and no avalanche records exist for that area. But the slab model suggests even a small shift could cause panic in a confined tent. Military testing. The late 1950s were an intense period of Soviet weapons development. Some point to parachute mines or other ordnance being tested nearby, devices that could cause massive internal injuries without leaving external marks. There were also multiple reported sightings of glowing orbs in the sky that night by witnesses dozens of kilometers away. Could the hikers have been victims of a test gone wrong, or unfortunate observers who saw something they shouldn't have? Infrasound hypothesis. Author Dani Eichar proposed that katabatic winds passing over the mountain could have created a Kármán vortex street, patterns of swirling air producing low-frequency sound waves. Infrasound is inaudible, but can induce intense feelings of anxiety, panic, even physical discomfort. If the hikers experienced this in the tent, they may have fled in disorientation, unable to make rational decisions in the freezing dark. Critics counter that while infrasound can disturb, it's unlikely to make experienced hikers abandon shelter without trying to grab warm clothing. Mansi attack theory. Early on, some suspected the local Mansi people might have attacked to drive the hikers off sacred land. But the investigation found no evidence of a struggle, and the footprints all matched the hikers' own. The Mansi had in fact helped searchers locate the bodies. This theory, while persistent in popular retellings, is largely dismissed by researchers. Paradoxical undressing. In extreme hypothermia, the body can misinterpret cold as heat, prompting victims to remove clothing. This could explain why some were found partially undressed, but not why they left the tent in such haste, or the severe trauma to others. Radiation clue. The radiation on some clothing sparked speculation of nuclear contamination, perhaps from military materials, perhaps carried unknowingly from other sites. One hiker had previously worked at a facility linked to the 1957 Kishtim nuclear disaster. Could clothing have retained contamination? Possibly, but the levels were not high enough to be lethal. And then there's the human factor, the possibility of a chain of small, understandable decisions that compounded into tragedy. A sudden noise or movement, snow shifting, a branch cracking, wakes one or two in the tent. They think the slope above is collapsing. They cut an exit rather than fumbling with frozen ties. Others follow, believing there's danger inside. Once outside, the cold bites instantly. The group splits. Some try to make a fire, others to return for supplies. Injured members slow progress. In minutes, hypothermia takes hold. In hours, they are gone. The last man to see the group alive, Yuri Yudin, spent his life haunted by the mystery. In interviews before his death in 2013, he often said, "If I could ask God just one question, it would be, what really happened that night?" The Dyatlov Pass site today is a memorial. Visitors still ski or hike there, sometimes leaving small tributes. The wind moves over the snow in the same restless patterns it did that winter, and the tent, in photographs from 1959, still leans in the mind's eye, its canvas cut open, footprints trailing away into the dark. Somewhere between snow science, military secrecy, and human error lies the answer. But until every layer of that night is uncovered, the pass will remain what it has become. Not just a place on a map, but a question carved into ice. From that frozen riddle, we travel east, deeper into Siberia, across an endless sea of taiga where the trees stand like waves caught mid-motion. Here, in the summer of 1908, the sky behaved in a way it never had before, and the earth still holds the memory. This is the story of the Tunguska event, the morning when the forest fell and the crater never came. It was just after 7 a.m., June 30th, 1908. The air was warm, the summer sun already lifting the mist from the swamps near the Podkamenaya Tunguska River. People in the scattered trading posts and nomad camps of Evenki herders began their morning routines, feeding reindeer, boiling tea over campfires, when the sky flared white. Witnesses would later describe it as if the sun had risen twice, with a blinding light that made shadows leap and vanish. Then came the sound, not a single explosion, but a rolling roar, a deep, sky-filling growl. In the seconds before it hit, reindeer stampeded, birds screamed, and people turned their faces upward, just in time to see the heavens split. A shockwave smashed through the forest, flattening an estimated 80 million trees in a radial pattern that stretched over 2,000 square kilometers. Camps were thrown to the ground. Windows shattered hundreds of kilometers away. In some places, the heat was so intense that clothes caught fire where people stood. And yet, when the world stopped shaking, there was no crater. News of the event took time to travel. Siberia was vast, and this was a remote, sparsely populated region. It was nearly 2 decades before the first scientific expedition, led by mineralogist Leonid Kulik, reached the blast zone in 1927. Kulik expected to find an impact site, a great hole in the earth, fragments of a meteorite scattered like treasure. Instead, he found a flattened forest with trees pointing outward like the spokes of a wheel. But at the center, only scorched ground. No giant hole, no obvious chunks of rock, from space. Kulik interviewed the Evenki people, who spoke of a great ball of fire crossing the sky, followed by waves of heat and wind so fierce it knocked animals from their feet. Some said the fireball split in two before it vanished. Others said it came from the south, not from above. And always, the strangeness, that no one could find what had fallen. Over the next century, scientists pieced together a picture. The leading theory is that a stony asteroid, roughly 50-60 meters wide, entered Earth's atmosphere at about 27 kilometers per second. Instead of striking the ground, it exploded in midair, releasing energy equivalent to 10 to 15 megatons, about 1,000 times more powerful than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. This airburst would have vaporized most of the object, scattering microscopic dust high into the atmosphere. That explains the heat, the flattened trees, and the absence of a crater. But for some, it leaves a residue of doubt. If it was simply an asteroid, why have no large fragments ever been found? Later expeditions recovered tiny glassy spheres from the soil, believed to be condensed rock from the vaporized body, but nothing larger than a grain of sand. And so, the theories multiply. Some scientists have suggested it could have been a comet, made mostly of ice and gas, which would have left even less trace after its airburst. Others point to unusual patterns in tree growth in the decades after, possibly caused by radiation. That's where the wilder ideas take root. A small nuclear detonation from a secret test, though in 1908, no nation had the capability. In the 1970s, a Soviet engineer named Alexei Zolotov proposed something stranger, that it was the crash of an alien spacecraft, either an accident or a deliberate self-destruction to avoid impact. His ideas were fueled by eyewitness accounts claiming the object changed direction in flight as though guided. While no physical evidence supports it, the idea still circulates in UFO communities. Others take inspiration from Nikola Tesla. In 1899, Tesla experimented with transmitting wireless energy across vast distances from his Colorado Springs lab. In theory, his Warden Cliff Tower on Long Island could have sent a beam of directed energy halfway across the world, but historians find no credible link between Tesla and Tunguska, though the coincidence of dates has kept the theory alive in fringe circles. In 2013, near the border with Kazakhstan, the Chelyabinsk meteor exploded, injuring over 1,000 people with its shock wave. Over 7,200 buildings were damaged. That modern event gave scientists a real-world laboratory for studying airbursts, and its similarities to Tunguska were striking, reinforcing the idea that the 1908 event was a natural cosmic visitor, not a conspiracy. And yet, Tunguska still keeps a secret or two. A 2007 Italian expedition claimed to have found a possible impact crater at Lake Checo, about 8 kilometers from the blast center, a small round lake with an unusual depth profile. Sediment cores showed signs of disturbance about a century earlier. Not all agree it's connected. Some geologists think the lake is far older, but the debate continues. To this day, the Tunguska blast zone still feels strange. Trees that survived on the edges of the impact grew with unusual speed for decades, as if the soil had been enriched or the climate subtly altered. Even now, satellites can trace the ghostly wheel pattern of flattened forest. It's easy to imagine the moment, standing in that stillness. the smell of resin from snapped pines, the vast silence where once millions of trees stood. No one alive today saw the fireball with their own eyes, but its echo lives in the scar on the land. A reminder that our planet moves through a shooting gallery of silent rocks and ice. And most days we're simply lucky. Whether it was stone, ice, or something stranger still, the Tunguska event is proof of how suddenly the ordinary sky can turn extraordinary. Now, we leave Siberia's fallen forest behind and drift into the blackness above it, to the realm where silence is the default and any voice not our own is a miracle. This story is about the night we might have heard such a voice, a sound that crossed space, arrived uninvited, and stayed only long enough for us to wonder. This is the story of the WOW signal. It began on the evening of August 15th, 1907, in the small university town of Delaware, Ohio. At the Ohio State University Radio Observatory, known affectionately as Big Ear, a vast stationary radio telescope was quietly scanning the skies. Its mission was part of the search for extraterrestrial intelligence program, patiently listening for narrowband radio signals that nature rarely produces, but technology might. That night, Big Ear was tuned to the 1420 megahertz frequency, the natural emission line of hydrogen, the most abundant element in the universe. The search for extraterrestrial intelligence researchers had long considered it a logical hailing frequency for civilizations trying to announce their presence. As the telescope slowly swept the sky in its fixed arc, the signal came. A narrow band spike, clean and unmistakable, lasting exactly 72 seconds. The length of time Big Ear could observe a single point in the sky before Earth's rotation carried it out of range. When astronomer Jerry Amon reviewed the data a few days later, his eyes caught a column of numbers and letters representing signal strength. One stood out. A steady climb to a peak, then a symmetrical fade. It was, by far, the most intense and unambiguous anomaly in the entire search for extraterrestrial intelligence record to that date. In the margin, Amon circled the sequence in red pen and wrote a single word, "Wow." That handwritten exclamation became the name of the signal, in the weight of its mystery. Amon and his colleagues immediately tried to re-observe the same region of the sky, near the constellation Sagittarius, in the direction of the globular cluster. They listened again and again. The signal never returned. Theories began to pile up. Some suggested it was a natural astrophysical source, perhaps a hydrogen-rich comet, whose emissions happened to mimic a narrow-band transmission. In 2017, researcher Antonio Paris proposed that comets Christensen and Gibbs, unknown at the time, had passed through the region and might have produced the hydrogen line spike. Others countered that comet emissions are too broad and noisy to match the perfect narrowband of the WOW signal. Others suggested it was human, a military transmission, or an Earth satellite briefly passing through the beam. Yet Big Ear was designed to reject signals from local sources. The signal was only detected in one of the telescope's 2 feed horns, consistent with an origin far beyond Earth. And then, of course, there is the romantic possibility that it was a deliberate beacon from another world. The symmetry, the intensity, the frequency choice, all tantalizing. But SETI scientists, disciplined by years of false alarms, knew the rule. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And one unrepeatable signal, no matter how perfect, is not enough. Still, there are odd details. The hydrogen line is considered quiet. Interstellar space has little noise there, so any signal in that band stands out against the cosmic background. A transmitting civilization might choose it precisely for that reason. Yet, if it was a beacon, why did it never repeat? The search for extraterrestrial intelligence has scanned the WOW signal coordinates countless times, with far more sensitive instruments, from the Very Large Array in New Mexico to the Green Bank Telescope in West Virginia. Nothing. Some amateur sleuths have pointed out that if the signal came from a rotating planet, or an object not fixed relative to the stars, it might have been beamed in our direction for just those 72 seconds by chance. Others suggest it could have been an interstellar probe passing briefly through our neighborhood, aiming a tight communication beam homeward with Earth accidentally in the way. In the search for extraterrestrial intelligence lore, the WOW signal is both a triumph and a frustration. It showed that the tools worked, that we could detect a signal fitting our best guess of what an artificial transmission might look like. And it showed just how fragile such opportunities are. A single pass, no second chance, no recording beyond the numbers on that printout. Eamon himself remained cautious. In interviews years later, he said, "I strongly suspect it was of Earth origin." And yet, when pressed, he admitted he could never explain exactly how. Today, the WOW signal lives in that liminal space where science and imagination meet. Skeptics see a coincidence. Dreamers see a hello from the stars, lost before we could answer. And so, the telescope keeps listening. Other ears have joined the vigil. The Allen Telescope Array, China's fast dish, backyard radio astronomers with home-built arrays. None have heard another WOW. Not yet. But the printout remains. A single piece of paper, a red ink circle, and that impulsive human word. It's not proof. It's an invitation. An invitation to keep the dishes turned skyward, to wait for another brief hello, to wonder if somewhere someone is still sending, and if we'll be lucky enough to be listening when they do. Now we move from the cold void of space to the quiet, dim-lit corner of a library. The kind where dust floats like pale snow in sunbeams, and where some books seem to watch you back. This story is about one of those books. It's about the moment you open a volume and realize it's not going to give you anything easily. This is the story of the Voynich manuscript, a book that has pushed back against readers for centuries. The manuscript first surfaced in 1912 when a Polish-American bookseller named Wilfrid Voynich claimed to have purchased it from a Jesuit college near Rome. He recognized immediately that it was unusual. Over 240 pages of handwritten text in an unknown script, decorated with illustrations that were beautiful, detailed, and deeply strange. The language, if it is a language, is unlike any other. The letters curve in elegant loops, almost musical in their rhythm, but they don't match any known alphabet. Words repeat and form patterns, as if they mean something, yet no one has ever convincingly translated them. The illustrations are no less mysterious. Some pages are filled with plants, lush, green, and carefully drawn, but almost none of these plants match real species. Others show astronomical diagrams, suns, moons, stars, even something like the zodiac. Still others depict women bathing in pools connected by tubes, as if part of some intricate plumbing of the human body and the cosmos combined. From the first glance, it feels like a map, not of our world, but of somewhere adjacent. Carbon dating has placed the parchment between 1404 and 1438, meaning the book was created during the late Middle Ages or early Renaissance. That much, at least, is certain. But the rest of its life is a trail of partial glimpses. We know it passed through the hands of Georg Baresch, a 17th century alchemist in Prague, who described it in a letter as a certain riddle in which I have been taking delight. Later, it found its way to Athanasius Kircher, a Jesuit scholar known for studying Egyptian hieroglyphs, a man fascinated by hidden languages. Then, it vanished from public record for centuries until Voynich himself brought it back into the light. And from that moment, the world began to argue about it. Some scholars think it's an elaborate medical or herbal text, perhaps a compendium of lost plant knowledge. Others think it's a code book, hiding dangerous knowledge from the Inquisition. There are theories it might be an early work on women's health, explaining the bathing scenes. But then, the stranger theories take over. Could it be a hoax? A meaningless script created by a skilled calligrapher to fool wealthy collectors? Cryptographers, including experts from the British and American intelligence services, have tried to prove it's nonsense. But statistical analyses of the text suggest it follows the patterns of real language. There's structure, rhythm, and distribution of words that's hard to fake over hundreds of pages. Some believe it's a form of constructed language, invented entirely by its author, much like J.R.R. Tolkien's Elvish tongues, but centuries earlier. If so, why? And why combine it with impossible plants and surreal cosmology? Others wonder if it's an encoded diary. Could it be that the illustrations are simply mnemonic devices, each page holding secrets meant only for the writer and their intended reader? If the code is personal, it may be unbreakable to anyone else. And then there are the wild edges of speculation that it's a copy of a text from a lost civilization, written in a language that no longer exists. That it's the work of Leonardo da Vinci in his youth, experimenting with mirror writing and coded botanical studies. That it's a medieval memory palace designed to store vast amounts of information in symbolic form. And of course, that it might be something not of Earth at all, an artifact of contact, recorded by someone trying to copy down knowledge from somewhere else, and doing so imperfectly. Modern technology has not solved the riddle. Multispectral imaging has revealed faint corrections and margin notes in a script different from the main text, but these too are undeciphered. Artificial intelligence models have tried to compare its patterns to known languages, with some results pointing toward a form of proto-Romance, while others insist it's closer to Semitic roots. Yet no translation makes sense across more than a few lines. In 2019, a team of Canadian researchers proposed that the manuscript might be a kind of glossolalia, language-like text produced without conscious meaning, similar to trance writing or speaking in tongues. If true, it would be less a code to be cracked than a psychological artifact, but that too is unprovable. For more than a century, the Voynich manuscript has passed through the hands of code breakers, linguists, botanists, astronomers, historians, and dreamers. None have opened it fully. It sits now at the Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library at Yale University under careful preservation. Anyone can see it. High-resolution scans are online, but to look at it is to join a very long line of people asking the same question, not just what does it mean, but what kind of person writes something that resists understanding for 600 years. And so, the book waits. It has been read by spies and scientists, by hobbyists with spare weekends, and AI programs with endless processing power. It has been dismissed as a hoax and praised as a masterpiece. Yet it remains where it began, a thing that says, "You may look, but I will not let you in." Perhaps that's the point. Perhaps some works are meant to be puzzles, not messages. Or perhaps its author knew that the best way to keep a secret is not to hide it, but to make it irresistible, so that seekers keep turning pages forever, never quite realizing they are being led in circles. Whatever the truth, the Voynich manuscript remains one of the most stubborn objects in human history. A mirror we can't quite see into. A voice that speaks in shapes instead of words. A book that has been waiting for centuries and is still waiting tonight. We leave the quiet of the library now, stepping out into crisp daylight, into the heart of Langley, Virginia, a place designed to keep secrets. Past the checkpoints, past the mirrored windows and the watchful cameras, the headquarters of the Central Intelligence Agency rises in pale stone and glass. It is a building full of closed doors, but in its courtyard stands an object designed to be opened. And for more than 3 decades, it has refused to fully yield. This is the story of Kryptos, the sculpture that has teased, tested, and tormented some of the best code breakers in the world. Kryptos is a tall, curving sheet of copper, nearly 12 feet high and 20 feet long, set into the courtyard's gentle slope. Its surface is carved with 1732 characters, letters, question marks, no spaces. The letters seem random at first glance, but they hide 4 encoded passages. It was created in 1990 by artist Jim Sanborn, working with former Central Intelligence Agency cryptographer Ed Scheidt. Sanborn envisioned Kryptos as both art and challenge, a puzzle hidden in plain sight. The agency approved its installation, perhaps amused by the idea that even inside the Central Intelligence Agency, not everyone could know everything. From the moment it was unveiled, Kryptos began whispering to those who passed it each day. "Can you read me?" The 4 passages were not all equally stubborn. In the 1990s, the first 3 were solved by a mix of CIA staff, members of the National Security Agency, and civilian code breakers. The first passage revealed a poetic text about between subtle shading and the absence of light lies the nuance of illusion, a phrase Sanborn himself wrote. The second was a fragment describing the coordinates of a location near the Central Intelligence Agency headquarters, a spot within the grounds, suggesting that the sculpture's mystery was tied to its surroundings. The third was a more elaborate riddle, paraphrasing part of archaeologist Howard Carter's diary from 1922, describing the moment he opened the tomb of Pharaoh Tutankhamun. It was wonderful things. By the mid-90s, only the 4th passage, known simply as K4, remained unsolved, and it still does today. Over the years, Sanborn has released clues, each one sending waves of excitement through the cryptography community. In 2010, he revealed that letters 64 to 69 of K4, when deciphered, spell Berlin. In 2000, and he gave another. Letter 70 to 74 read clock. Together they point towards something. A Berlin clock, or a clock in Berlin, or a metaphor for time. But exactly what? No one can yet say. Sanborn insists the clues are genuine and that K4 has a definite logical solution. He's said publicly that if he dies before it's solved, he will leave instructions in his will so the answer will one day be revealed. The pursuit of K4 has drawn in all kinds: retired intelligence officers who worked on Cold War cipher systems, mathematicians, amateur puzzle enthusiasts, programmers, even school classes. Online forums dedicated to cryptos, like the one maintained by Ilanka Dunin, one of its most well-known civilian hunters, track every theory, every dead end. Some think the final passage may reveal another set of coordinates, leading to a physical location or hidden object. Others think it may be a phrase, perhaps the key to understanding the entire sculpture. There are those who suspect K4 might even be a trick, a cipher that requires something outside the sculpture entirely, like a specific piece of historical data or a physical artifact. And then there's the possibility no one wants to consider, that K4 might be unsolvable without information Sanborn has never given and might never give until he chooses. Sanborn himself has spoken of how the sculpture's design mirrors the way intelligence agencies work. The layering of secrets, the use of partial truths, the way one answer only opens a door to another question. Crypto sits in a space where even most Central Intelligence Agency employees need clearance to enter, yet it can be seen from certain office windows. Imagine passing it every morning on the way to your desk, knowing that its surface holds something no one around you has yet cracked. There's an irony here. Kryptos is surrounded by people who spend their careers breaking other people's codes. And still, it stands untouched. Over the years, some have tried to solve it by brute force, feeding its letters into vast computer programs that attempt billions of combinations. Others have turned to more subtle methods, frequency analysis, transposition hypotheses, even looking for hidden patterns in the sculpture's shadows at certain times of day. Every so often, a new theory emerges that seems persuasive. Perhaps it's a visionaire cipher keyed to Berlin clock. Or perhaps it requires interpreting the sculpture's curved shape as a spiral text. But always, the solution slips away. Sanborn has said he enjoys the way the mystery has lived and evolved. He's hinted that the final answer is layered, that solving K4 will not just yield a phrase, but something that points beyond itself. He has also admitted that watching people work on it has been the best part of the whole project. And maybe that's the point. In intelligence work, sometimes the pursuit matters as much as the answer. So Crypto stands there still, in a courtyard surrounded by walls of stone and glass, visible to those who can't touch it, holding its last secret. 3 keys have been turned. The 4th remains in the lock. Someday, perhaps, someone will hear the click as it opens. Or perhaps it will remain forever in this state, the answer just out of reach, the question perfect in its incompleteness. Now we drift back more than 4 centuries, to the windswept shores of what is now North Carolina, when the map of the New World was still mostly blank to European eyes. This story is about the first English settlement in North America, and how it simply vanished. This is the story of Roanoke Colony. It began in the summer of 1587, when a group of about 115 settlers Men, women, and children arrived on Roanoke Island under the leadership of Governor John White. They were not the first to attempt living there. An earlier expedition had failed, but this time the plan was to establish a permanent community, a foothold for England in the New World. The settlers built homes, planted crops, and tried to establish relations with nearby Native American tribes. Some tribes were cautiously friendly. Others remembered past conflicts with the English and kept their distance or showed open hostility. Food supplies were limited, and the colony depended on eventual resupply from England. But the timing could not have been worse. Only a few weeks after arriving, White sailed back to England to gather more provisions. He left behind his daughter, Eleanor Dare, and her newborn baby, Virginia Dare, the first English child born in the Americas. White expected to return within months, but history intervened. England was on the brink of war with Spain. In 1588, the Spanish Armada threatened invasion, and every available English ship was called to defend the homeland. White could not secure passage back to Roanoke for 3 long years. When he finally returned in 1590, his ship anchored off Roanoke Island in the fading light of an August evening. The settlement was silent. There were no voices, no smoke from cooking fires, no footsteps in the sand. The houses had been carefully dismantled, not destroyed, suggesting an organized departure rather than a sudden flight. There were no bodies, no signs of violence. And then White saw it. Carved into one of the wooden posts of the settlement was a single word, Croatoan. On another tree nearby, the letters Charo, as if the carving had been interrupted. White had agreed with the settlers before leaving that if they had to move, they would carve a message to tell him where they had gone. If they were in danger, they would carve a Maltese cross beside it. There was no cross, which meant, in theory, that they had relocated peacefully. The word Croatoan referred to a nearby island, now known as Hatteras Island, home to a Native American tribe of the same name. White wanted to sail there immediately. But a storm blew in, damaging his ship and forcing the crew to abandon the search. White would never see the settlers or his family again. And so began more than 4 centuries of speculation. One possibility is that the colonists did exactly what the carving suggested. They went to live with the Croatoan tribe. Some oral histories from Native American communities in the region tell of people with lighter skin or European features living among them generations later. Another theory is that they split up, some joining the Croatoans, others traveling inland to join different tribes. This could explain why archaeological evidence has been so elusive. Their traces may have been absorbed into the fabric of other communities, but not all theories are peaceful. Some believe the colonists fell victim to hostile tribes, particularly those with whom relations had soured. The absence of remains is sometimes explained by burial or by the natural reclamation of the land over centuries. Others point to the possibility of starvation or disease forcing desperate choices. The late 16th century was a time of shifting alliances and resource scarcity among the native peoples. Newcomers could easily become casualties of local politics. And then there are stranger suggestions that the settlers tried to sail back to England in a small vessel and were lost at sea, that they were captured by the Spanish, who had outposts farther south. Even that, they attempted to move inland toward the Chesapeake Bay, where they met with disaster. In recent years, Archaeologists have uncovered tantalizing clues. Excavations on Hatteras Island have turned up artifacts of European origin from the correct time period. A sword hilt, copper aglets, fragments of slate. These items could have been acquired through trade, or they could be the belongings of Roanoke settlers who lived and died there. Another dig site, known as Site X on the mainland, revealed pottery fragments that match English wares of the 1580s, suggesting some settlers may have moved inland. But none of these finds have answered the central question: what happened to all of them? In the absence of certainty, Roanoke has become a canvas for the imagination. Writers and storytellers have turned it into a ghost story, a cautionary tale, a riddle. The word Croatoan itself has taken on a kind of supernatural weight, appearing in fiction and folklore as a mark of disappearance. And yet, the most likely answer may be the simplest. The colonists integrated into native communities, losing their English identity within a generation. No one ever came to record their lives, and so they faded into the background of history. Still, the image remains. Governor White stepping onto an empty shore, the carved word catching the light, the wind moving through the grass where a village once stood. It is a mystery that has resisted resolution, not because the answer is unknowable, but because the traces are too thin, too scattered, too easily swallowed by time.